Hey everyone, welcome back. Let's dive into a gripping revenge story from the heart of the Midwest with Revenge Argon. My name is Grace Miller. I'm 38 years old, and last weekend my sister turned her own wedding into a stage to humiliate me. 1 minute I was standing by the bar with a drink, hoping I could slip out after the next song. The next minute, she had her hand clamped around my wrist, pulling me through the crowd toward a tall man in a suit. She was beaming the way she does when she smells a promotion. "You have to meet my boss," she said, loud enough that the nearest tables could hear. Snorts. Then she tilted her head toward me, and with this little smirk that made my stomach drop, she added, "This is my failed little sister." For a second, I thought I'd heard her wrong. Then the conversations around us faded, and I felt eyes turning to stare. My parents were standing right beside her. They didn't correct her. They laughed. "It's embarrassing to even have a child like that." One of them said like it was some cute joke, like I wasn't right there trying to remember how to breathe. That was when he really looked at me, her boss. His eyes went from my face to the name on my place card and back again, and the color drained out of his. He froze like somebody had just knocked the air out of his chest. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with disbelief. "Hello," he said slowly. "I didn't expect to see you here." The room went dead silent. "If you've ever been torn down by the people who were supposed to love you the most, stay with me until the end and hit like and subscribe, because what happened after that is something my sister never saw coming." To understand why that one sentence at the wedding felt like a punch to the throat, you need to know how I became the family's failure sister in the first place. On paper, my life looks fine. I live in a small apartment in Evanston, just outside Chicago. I run my own business as a freelance digital marketing strategist. I build campaigns for local restaurants, small e-commerce brands, a couple of non-profits. I pay my bills, I keep my clients happy, and I actually like what I do. But in my family, if you don't have a shiny job title in a glass office downtown, you're a disappointment. My little sister Lydia is the star. She works as a senior account director at a big advertising agency in the city, flies out for client meetings, posts rooftop cocktails and first-class boarding passes on Instagram. My parents eat it up. At every holiday, they brag about her latest promotion or the new car she leased, then turn to me and ask if I've thought about getting a real job yet. 6 months before the wedding, Lydia called me, sounding stressed. She said she was drowning in work and asked if I could look over a few things for her just to help out. A few things turned out to be almost every contract tied to the wedding. The venue agreement had a hidden clause that would have charged her a massive fee if she missed a payment deadline by even one day. The photographer had slipped in an extra $5,000 travel fee that was never discussed. The band still hadn't received a deposit and was about to give the date to someone else. The florist's quote had quietly jumped up from the original estimate. Lydia brushed it off when I pointed it out. Snorts. She said she was too busy to deal with it and told me I was better with the boring details anyway. So, I handled it. I spent hours on the phone with the venue pushing them to remove the penalty clause and lock in a more reasonable schedule. I went back and forth with the photographer until they agreed to honor the original rate. When the band threatened to cancel, I wired a deposit from my own savings account because Lydia couldn't move money around that week. I negotiated a 15% discount from the florist by comparing competitor quotes and offering them future referrals through my client network. By the time everything was secure, I had sunk just over $10,000 of my own money into deposits and rush fees to keep her perfect from collapsing. I told myself I would get it back once things calmed down. Lydia never asked how it got fixed. She just sent me a text that said, "Knew you'd figure it out. You're good at that behind-the-scenes stuff." At the reception, I watched her float from table to table while her coworkers told her she had such an eye for detail and that the whole event was flawless. My parents smiled like they had personally designed the place. Nobody looked in my direction. Nobody knew that if I had done nothing, there wouldn't even have been a wedding for her to show off at. So when she stood there in front of her boss and introduced me as her failed little sister, it wasn't just cruel. It was a reminder that in their eyes, everything I do only matters if it makes her look better. And the way he looked at me that night, like he knew something my family didn't, was the first sign that this time things were going to play out differently. The morning after the wedding, I woke up with my makeup still smeared on my face and my dress crumpled on the chair. My phone was full of photos Lydia had been tagged in. Her laughing with her bridesmaids, her kissing her new husband, her standing with her boss and a cluster of coworkers, all of them holding champagne. In every picture, she looked like the main character. In every picture, I was either cropped out or nowhere to be seen. I almost called in sick to my own life that day, but I had client calls booked and invoices to send, so I dragged myself into the city. My office is a tiny rented space above a coffee shop in downtown Chicago. It's nothing fancy: one window, a second-hand desk, a whiteboard with half-erased campaign ideas, and a bookshelf with old marketing books and binders from projects I'd done years ago. I was halfway through answering emails when I heard footsteps in the hallway and a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, the last person I thought I'd ever see standing there was my sister's boss. In a simple navy suit, folder in hand, he looked more serious than he had at the wedding. "Grace Miller?" he asked like he needed to double-check. I nodded, gripping the doorknob. "I'm Daniel Whitaker. We were introduced last night." My stomach clenched. "I remember," I said quietly. "I hope my family didn't waste too much of your evening." His expression flickered, almost guilty. "Actually, that's why I'm here," he said. "Do you have a few minutes?" I stepped aside and let him in. He glanced around my space at the whiteboard with client names, the modest setup, the small stack of business cards that just said Grace Miller, Digital Strategy and Consulting. Then he set the folder down on my desk and flipped it open. Inside was a printed report with my name on it. Same spelling, same signature at the bottom, just 12 years younger and a lot more hopeful. "I've been trying to figure out if this was a coincidence," he said. "But it's not, is it?" I stared at the cover page. It was a market analysis and digital strategy proposal I'd written for a small startup agency more than a decade ago. At the time, a friend of a friend had introduced me to a guy whose marketing firm was circling the drain. I was just getting started in freelancing. I did the work practically for free because I needed a case study. "You were the one with the tiny office in that converted warehouse," I said slowly, memories slotting into place. "You were trying to land a food brand, and you were about to lose your lease." Daniel let out a short breath that sounded like a laugh. "Yeah, that was me. We were about 2 weeks from shutting the doors. Then your report landed in my inbox. You'd torn apart our numbers, rebuilt the offer, and given us a step-by-step plan. I followed it, desperate, and we signed a multi-year contract. That client is the reason my agency exists today." He tapped the paper gently. "I kept this. I've quoted pieces of it in meetings, but the person who wrote it vanished. No website, no LinkedIn, no nothing. I tried to find you once and failed." My throat tightened. Back then, I'd been juggling 3 part-time jobs and taking on random gigs. I didn't even realize my work had made that big of a difference. At the wedding, Daniel went on, "When your sister called you her failed little sister, I thought I must be mishearing. Then I saw your name on the place card." He looked me in the eyes. "Grace, the woman who helped save my business is not a failure." Heat rushed to my face, a mix of shame and anger I didn't know what to do with. "My family doesn't know about any of that," I said. "They don't really ask." I gathered. He replied, jaw tightening. He hesitated, then added, "I didn't just come to say thank you. There's something else you should know. We've been running an internal audit at the agency. Some of the irregularities involve your sister. And after what I saw last night, I realized I needed to talk to you directly." For the first time, it hit me that the look on his face at the wedding hadn't just been awkwardness. It had been recognition and maybe a warning. Daniel sat down in the chair across from my desk like he was bracing himself to deliver bad news to a client. "I need you to understand," he said. "I didn't walk into your wedding planning to talk business, but once I realized who you were and who she was, I couldn't ignore it anymore." He slid a second stack of papers out of the folder. This one didn't have my name on it. It had my sister's. "We've been doing an internal audit for the last few months," he continued. "We merged with another agency last year, and anytime there's a merger, You have to clean house. Policies, expenses, client credits. We started seeing patterns that didn't make sense. I forced myself to look at the top page. It was an email thread. A junior strategist laying out a campaign concept line by line, attaching early mock-ups and research, sending it all to Lydia late at night with a nervous, "What do you think?" At the bottom of the thread, there was a forwarded message to the client. Same idea, same language, just Lydia's name in the signature, and no mention of the junior at all. Daniel flipped to another page. This one was a performance review that mentioned a brilliant concept that secured a major fashion client with Lydia listed as the creative lead. "The bonus from this campaign alone was $35,000, he said quietly. "Your sister collected it. The person who actually did the heavy lifting got a vague, great team player line on their review." My stomach twisted. I'd seen Lydia do minor versions of this in school, taking credit for group projects, but I'd convinced myself she'd grown out of it. Apparently not. Daniel turned to a spreadsheet highlighted in red. "Then we got to the expenses," he said. Flights labelled as client retreats that lined up suspiciously well with her personal vacations. Designer shopping trips filed under wardrobe for client F-facing meetings. Restaurant bills for just her and her husband coded as client dinners. And then he hesitated, looking almost sorry. Charges that coincided with wedding planning, dress fittings, venue deposits, payments to vendors. My pulse thudded in my ears. "Are you saying she put her wedding on the company card?" "Not all of it, but enough of it," he replied. "The total we've flagged so far is about $95,000 in questionable expenses over 2 years. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a second, trying to reconcile the image of my sister sobbing over centerpieces with the woman siphoning company money into her personal life. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "If this is an HR issue, don't you just fire her and move on?" Daniel clasped his hands together. "Because this isn't just about her," he said. "It exposed bigger problems with how the agency tracks credit, approves budgets, and signs off on expenses. Problems that nearly killed my first company until someone like you tore everything apart and rebuilt it." He nodded toward the old report with my name on it. "I need that person again for real this time. Paid what you should have been paid back then." He laid out the offer like he'd been rehearsing it. A 9-month contract, $200,000. My role would be to audit the way the merged agency handled marketing strategy and spending, redesign the approval process, and create a system where credit and money couldn't be quietly rerouted to whoever shouted the loudest. "This isn't about revenge," he said. "If the evidence stands, your sister will face consequences whether you're involved or not. I won't ask you to make decisions about her job. I want you focused on fixing the machine that let this happen." I swallowed hard. $200,000 was more money than I had ever made in a single year. It was enough to clear my debts, rebuild my savings after bailing out her wedding, and finally invest back into my own business instead of everyone else's dreams. "There is one more thing," Daniel added, almost as an afterthought. "When our auditors pulled statements, they noticed a few transfers out of your parents' account years ago that landed in your sister's name just before her grad school tuition payments. Those funds originally came from an education trust labeled with your initials. I don't know what that means for your family, but I thought you deserved to know your name has been quietly cleaning up after them for a very long time." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Somewhere between rage and relief, a cold clarity settled in. My family had spent years calling me a failure while quietly using my opportunities and my money to prop up the daughter they were proud of. And now the one person they couldn't manipulate, my sister's boss, was sitting in my cramped office, offering me a chance not just to help fix his company, but to finally stop fixing their messes for free. I didn't give Daniel an answer on the spot. I asked for the weekend, went home, stared at the ceiling for hours, and thought about every time my parents had told me I was too soft and too scattered to handle anything big. By Monday morning, I'd signed the contract. If my family was going to keep using my name in their messes, then my name was finally going to pay me instead of draining me. The first few weeks at the agency were strangely surreal. I wasn't an employee. I was the outside consultant with full access. I sat in conference rooms with glass walls, combing through budgets and campaign reports, mapping out where money and credit were supposed to go versus where they actually ended up.